Good afternoon, and welcome to the first of our SMACM colloquia for the spring semester of 2020 here at Wittenberg University. I'm Brian Shelburne, member of the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science. It's my pleasure to introduce a 1985 graduate of Wittenberg University, Steve Rizzi. He is, I believe, one of the first computer science majors to graduate from Wittenberg. I'd like to begin by just sort of sharing a bit of Steve's biography. Steve Rizzi lives in Annapolis, Maryland, and is the vice president of the National Capital Region for a company called Patterns Analysis and Recognition, or PAR. He has over 35 years of experience in computer science, research and development, leading researchers in U.S. government projects funded by DARPA, NSA, NIH, CDC, very important right now, and the Air Force Research Lab, and commercial products funded by Walt Disney Imagineering, Pfizer, Geico, Citibank, and international products in Europe, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Steve lives...
too?
Huh?
Not Antarctica?
Not Antarctica. There's not a lot of customers there. Yeah. Steve lived in Australia for several years as Director of Asia Pacific Business for SAIC. This is an $11 billion technology company, and was inducted into the U.S. National Academy of Engineering's Frontiers of Engineering program in 1998 in recognition of early career national engineering leaders. He has served in numerous state and federal advisory committees, and his staff's products have been recognized with awards from Computer World, Federal Computing Week, and the government executive magazines. Mr. Rizzi works closely with a wide range of academic researchers in the U.S. and abroad on government and commercially funded research projects. Steve and his wife are both 1985 graduates of Wittenberg, and Steve was a member of Wittenberg's first class of computer science majors, for which he is ordinarily proud of, as a matter of fact. And I don't blame him.
Actually, I was lucky. I had no backup plan. If that didn't work out, it would have been bad.
Beth and Steve have 3 adult daughters, an artist, a teacher, and a biomedical engineer. And all 3 daughters attended liberal arts institutions. So Steve is going to talk on ethics in computer science, be prepared to take a stand. And I find this topic particularly appropriate in this day and age, given the ubiquity of computer architecture everywhere. And I think it's raising a lot of ethical issues which we need to address, both as a nation and as computer scientists and mathematicians. And so, without further ado, I introduce Steve.
Thank you, Brad. So it's a joy to be back. I think I've only been here twice since graduation.
Yeah.
Once was at my 10-year reunion, and then once was meeting with Brian about 3 or 4 years ago.
I think it was about 10 years ago.
No, it was not.
Okay.
This is a horrible thing, this whole growing old thing. But anyway, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm an extraordinary advocate for liberal arts in the sciences. And that comes from being in the sciences and seeing the lack of liberal arts. So when you're the computer scientist amongst a group of electrical engineers, and not only that, the only person who's actually taken a political science course or history course, you're alone. And a lot of, I think early in my career that was not, that was kind of an awkward thing, but it served me well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think so, and I hope that you get the message that I'm going to try to send to you. This process that we're going to go through is a bit of an experiment. So we're going to conduct an experiment. That experiment is going to be a hypothesis that liberal arts trained computer scientists are better equipped in terms of their life experience, the way that they think, and the way that they weigh alternatives to deal with ethical dilemma. And I'm also going to assert that in our field, we run into ethical dilemma more than most. I mean, there certainly are fields like health that run into it probably equally as often as we do. But as I tell my staff, the reason I got into computer science is that it's the only science that doesn't adhere to physical laws. Now certainly there's math to it, and there's other types of disciplines, but it's an artifact of what people have imagined. That's what computer science is. And so as a result, we're running into ethical dilemma on a daily basis. And so the experiment that we're going to go through here is I'm going to prove to you that this is true by going through examples of projects that I've worked on in my career where my liberal arts training helped me contribute in a way that was meaningful to that team and to the nation on some of these projects. We're going to have an analysis portion of this experiment where I'm going to have you in the audience think about this and actually analyze the data and come to your own conclusion of whether or not you think that I've convinced you that this is true. And then we're going to actually have an exercise at the end where we're going to try to apply this foundation we've talked about that you have in your heads because you've been here. And you're getting this every day to current ethical dilemma that I think are right here at our doorstep right now. So let's talk about these guys. Everybody know who these two guys are? No? Not at all? No? So this is Brin and Page. These are the inventors of Google. And when they left Stanford early to found Google, they had this motto for their company, and it was, "Don't be evil." Don't be evil. So why did they say that? Well, because what they were doing is they were manipulating the way that people were accessing information on the internet. That was their job. Their job was to take what existed at that point. Okay, so for those of you that didn't know what the World Wide Web was in 1994 because you weren't around, the way that you got around was there was a page called the What's New page. It was the NCSA's What's New page. And it was a taxonomy. The way that they organized the World Wide Web was by categories. It's like going to the library, right? So if you wanted to find a link, there was no search engine. If you wanted to find a link, you had to work your way through this taxonomy down to the point where you actually got a set of categories that related to what you were after, and then you clicked on it. Okay. There were a number of companies that were trying to solve the other problem, which was, I want to ask a question, give me all links that are related or relevant to a particular set of keywords. Google was one. There's several others that are still around. Yahoo's one that's still around, but there were lots of others that don't exist anymore. These guys had a unique idea, and their idea was this algorithm that they called PageRank. So PageRank is actually not a relevancy ranking algorithm. It has relevancy ranking in it, but it also looks at what pages are popular. Okay, so they're relying on a crowdsourcing algorithm that says if people who are looking for this term are going there, it must be good. Must be good. So they did that, but they struggled with a business model. They were making no money. They went to Wall Street and said, God, look at all these hits on our page. All these eyeballs. That was the idea. It was the whole thing back then. We're selling eyeballs. Eyeballs don't pay the bills, right? And so they were having some pretty serious difficulty with making money, so they went to advertising. And that initial advertising was something that they called AdWords, where people could buy a word, sort of like Wheel of Fortune, right? Buy a letter. You could buy a word, and if somebody asked for that word, an ad would come up on the results page. That seemed innocent enough, right? Not evil, but very quickly they sort of diverged into this space of things that were not quite so not evil, right? So the first thing was, well, I'm going to alter the ranking based on sponsorship. So if you pay me enough, I'm going to put your thing first, regardless of whether or not it's relevant. Okay, that's interesting. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to become a de facto monopoly. It's been done before. Did that with the railroads, did that with Microsoft. All those things are true. But these guys are really devious because they've got not only Google, but Chrome and Android, all these platforms, they're kind of everywhere. And now, since they're collecting all this information on you, gosh, they know a lot about you that you don't even know. They got into your Gmail, so now they give you advertising based on what's in your Gmail. They have locational information from your Android phone. They know where you are all the time. And, hey, look, okay, Google.
Yeah.
Now he knows what you're saying in your own house. So, man, I don't know. Evil? Not evil? I don't know. But it's certainly not what they were originally planning to do, right? So, with that said, these particular guys, I'm going to try to go through each of these projects that I've worked on. And each one of them are structured the same way. Each of the slides sort of says what the project was, and then what the ethical dilemmas were. I'm going to throw those out to you guys so you can think about them. And I want you to think about what you would do in this circumstance. What you would leverage out of your liberal arts experience and background. Or, in looking at these things, if you're, an underclassman, what classes should I be taking? Because I don't have a way to answer that question. Yes, in my head, to have an opinion. It's a DARPA program. It was in 88, I guess. And the purpose of the program was to build a totally autonomous weapon system that you could send into an area, a 10-kilometer by 10-kilometer area. It would go find mobile missiles and blow them up with no intervention. No human beings in the loop. The reason was that we couldn't assure network connectivity, communications connectivity forward deployed to these systems. And they needed to be survivable. So the targets were pretty specific. They're tactical ballistic missiles, this thing right here, or mobile surface-to-air missile systems. So they're bad things. Okay. So the questions that come up in a system like this are, does a system like this that's totally autonomous violate the international laws of war, like a mine, right? So what are the other systems that are like this? Mines. What are the other ones? None. There's really no other system that pulls its own trigger. Okay. Well, we know that anti-personnel mines have been judged to be an illegal weapon under the Hague's construct for the laws of war. How is this different than a mine? Not sure. When do we know that a weapon like this is sufficiently robust to be usable? 0.9 probability of detection? What about the false alarm rate? Does it have to be perfect? What if it hits a school bus that looks kind of like one of these things? What if even it hits a non-mobile missile platform? Is that okay? And then, one of these questions that's probably the worst one here is who's to blame if it does something bad? If this was a person, if this was a pilot, we know who to blame. Who's to blame here? Is it you and me for designing this system? Is it the guy in the field that pushed the button to launch it? He certainly didn't write the algorithm. So think about those. Next one. I worked on a project for Walt Disney Imagination called Celebration. So, how many of you have heard of Epcot? Epcot? Okay. How many of you knew that Epcot was not supposed to be a theme park? Okay. So Epcot stands for Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow. It was supposed to be a smart city. It was supposed to be a place where people lived and worked and used advanced technology in partnership with industry and academia. That was the idea. That program got shelved after Walt died, and his brother brought it back as a theme park, I guess. But in 1995, Walt Disney Imagineering decided to bring back the idea. And so instead of building sort of a Jetsons-style town, which Epcot was originally designed as sort of this Jetson thing, They did, you know, Disney's really good at one thing. I learned a lot from working with Disney. I'm not a business person. It's not my field. I never took a business course at Wittenberg. Knew nothing about marketing. These guys are geniuses. They did lots of focus group work and figured out that people didn't want to live with the Jetsons. They wanted to live in Mayberry. Okay? They wanted to be back to the 1950s when times were simple and you could, you know, see your neighbor over the fence and everything was happy. But they wanted all that cool technology baked in, right? And that's what they got. So celebration is, we used to call it Mayberry on the outside, Jetsons on the inside. So at this time, none of you will remember this, but this is 96. This was the time when everybody had modems, something called a modem. And 2400 kilobit per second was kind of state of the art. 4800 if you were really good. 1.92? These are really slow, really slow. This was a hybrid fiber coax to the premise. So it was basically FiOS to the node and then coax to the house. And so we had, I think it was maybe 25 megabit per second in this community in 90 whatever, which was crazy. We could do video. Couldn't do video very easily anywhere else in the world. We also did a lot with these little gizmos right here. It's a Java ring. So that's an 8-bit microprocessor in a ring with a Java virtual machine in the ring. And so we could load applets into that ring and it would draw power when you click it into a socket. So the socket had 2-wire power and data from the side and the bottom. And so we could basically use that device to store not just information like credit cards and the like, but actual rules about when do I want to give up my credit card to somebody? When do I want to give up my personal information to somebody? And all of those rules were stored here on the ring in each of these applets that were all separately sandboxed from each other. So the health-related applets were separate from the commerce ones, were separate from the education ones. Same thing was true here with this Visa cash card. This was a stored value card where it actually had cash on the card. And if you lost it, you were out however much money was on the card, which at the time was also kind of revolutionary. So what were the questions here? Well, we were doing this, and we had a hospital, had a K-12 school. We did it in conjunction with Stetson University, so we had a tertiary educational institution. We had lots of these bits, right? But we were doing this at a time when we didn't have help, right? So HIPAA, who knows what HIPAA is? Okay, all right, so HIPAA is what keeps all your health records safe. Safe. It also prevents you from actually doing anything efficiently with your health records. It's what keeps one doctor from giving information to another doctor, taking your test results and giving them without your permission. Right. Well, we didn't have HIPAA. So there were no rules. No one had promulgated rules on what to do with medical records and with test results. And we were doing things like at the hospital, which is actually this part of the campus right here, test results, and we were making test results available over the community network. We had the regs, right? So we had to figure that out. How many people know what FERPA is? This is an education of higher learning, FERPA. Okay, these are your educational related privacy things, like your grades, other stuff that relates to your educational process. Well, FERPA existed before that, but there were not any rules promulgated until 2002 on electronic exchange of FERPA data. So we had a K-12 school, we had a tertiary education institution, we were moving grades around, storing them in a centralized server that was not on premise, it was not associated with the county school system. Okay, well, that probably wouldn't pass reg now, but we had to figure out how to make that safe to the best we could. Given that there was so much information in here to be messed around with, we started worrying about, well, do we have to have a police force on the network? I mean, we had a police force in the town, right? And we got this network with all this high-value information. Shouldn't somebody be looking at this stuff? So this is before cybersecurity, guys. You know, remember, everybody else in the big world out here is on modems, and we're in this other world here. And so the question was, well, what if there's a bad actor in the town? We need to figure that out and stop that person. Well, we're not going to have the local police do it. They couldn't even spell computer. So what do we do about that? I mean, we can't call the FBI every time something like this happens in our little town. That's nuts. So we had to figure that out. And then these little gizmos, gosh, they're cool tech. But, you know, they lack a couple of interesting things. Like, you know, there's no bioinformation that ties this ring to me uniquely. Right? So if you have my ring, you have me. And that's bad. You really don't want that. I mean, we did have passwords, and that seemed okay. But, you know, today, that doesn't make me feel very comfortable. We had little passwords. So that was another problem. Scale that up big. Okay, so that's a little project. This project, big project. So this was a project in 2008 where we had a customer that wanted to build a special administrative region in Yemen and Djibouti. So who knows where Yemen and Djibouti are? Okay. So this is the Gulf of Aden, right here. This is a really bad place. Pirates, and I don't mean the Caribbean. I mean right here, pirates. So the idea was that we were going to build this enormous bridge, which was going to be the longest bridge in the world, connecting Asia and Africa, the Middle East and Africa. Crazy. It was going to have both rail and truck traffic to bridge the economies of those two continents. Free trade, no taxes, no foreign exchange costs, free movement, e-commerce. Heaven comes to mind if you're a business person. But gosh, what an incredibly complex thing, considering the fact that the people that live here, and the people that live here, and the people that live in Eritrea over here are probably the poorest people in the world. Some of the poorest. And you're going to build this thing, which is like, you know, the idea, the model was Dubai. Anybody seen pictures of Dubai? It was crazy. It was a crazy idea. And in addition to that, since you've got this sort of have and have not situation, you know, what's the likelihood that there's going to be some major public safety issue or other related thing, either on land or at sea? And since that might happen, you know, how do we balance rights and privileges, and how do we do that consistent with the laws of Yemen and Djibouti? So understand, people on this team, we were literally writing a constitution for this place. I wasn't, I'm a computer scientist. But there were people who were ex-State Department who were working on this project, and they were helping the customer develop sort of the institutional documents of a new place, right? This is hard stuff, right? And when you're being asked to implement applications that are going to enable this vision, if you don't have the context for all the things I just said, it just seems bad to me. It seems like the probability of doing something really stupid is huge. Huge. All right, next one. When Brian mentioned I was down in Australia. By the way, if any of you want to move to Australia, do it. It was the best thing I ever did. Most fabulous country ever. I'd go back tomorrow. They have a program down there called the National Broadband Network. We were contracted to help implement it. It was a $40 billion program to create universal broadband. Fiber to the house. So Fios for everyone. And that included the use of 2 dedicated geosynchronous satellites to serve all these places in the middle that are not so close to other people. But all these places on the edge are all served by fiber to the premise at some unprecedented data rates. So, we're talking 100 gigabits per second. What do you even do with 100 gigabits per second? We actually had a project on the project to brainstorm out, what do we do with 100 gigabits per second? That's a crazy project, well, this has sort of an unprecedented cybersecurity problem. You talk about denial of service. Give me 100 gigabits worth of denial of service. That's awesome. Talk about an amazing capacity. So we had to spend a lot of time when we were designing this thing to look at the public safety and surveillance measures appropriate for the network and build them in from the beginning. I think one of the things that's complex about our system is we have a system of systems. Just like our power grid is a system of systems that were never really meant to be a integrated capability. This was intended from the very beginning to be a top-down design. And so we had a chance to actually work that sort of a problem in the design itself. Then you get these other questions, like how do you deal with extra-jurisdictional threats, right? Most of the really bad stuff doesn't happen from somebody in Australia. It happens from somebody in the former Soviet Union, or China, or Korea, or some other place that doesn't really have a lot of motivation to be cooperative. So what do we do about that? And how do we look at not only the technical solutions, but the legal solutions to both surveillance, what's appropriate under Australian law, not my law, by the way, that's another exciting thing, being in a foreign country and having to learn their laws, because they're different. That's kind of cool. So this was one of the ones that we struggled about, this one. Should there be a kill switch? Should there be an internet kill switch that the Prime Minister or somebody can just say, we're turning the damn thing on?
Considering how much medical tools are on the internet, that would probably end up killing a lot of people.
Well, the issue is, what does it mean to have a kill switch? Is the kill switch just disconnecting you from the outside world, i.e. outside Australia? Does it mean that I have nested kill switches, right? That I stop interstate communications? Do I embargo a location and just basically say, hey, I can't deal with this. I'm basically disconnecting that section of the network from the rest of the network right now. I'm quarantining it, right? So this was a very active area of discussion. And for me, I'll tell you what helped me here was that bio major that didn't work out, right? I was really interested in biology. And the whole idea of thinking about this stuff, as an epidemiological problem, right? Thinking about this as a public health problem. It's back to the health thing. You kill somebody in the hospital, you've now reached that line that would be the case for a kinetic attack. For a kinetic attack. Does the government believe that that is an act of war? In Australia, the answer was maybe. Not kidding. Maybe. What you probably didn't know is that the answer in the United States, the answer is yes. It is an act of war.
Oh, interesting. Stuck next.
And can a cyber attack be a war crime?
If it targets, say, the children of civilians and
Any non-combatant. Under the Hague Convention, any non-combatant is an act of war. So if I purposely target civilians with the intent to target civilians, that can be an act of war. Here's what I'm working on right now. And it should apply to people in this room that are working big data sorts of problems, data analytics kinds of problems. So this is the Maryland Longitudinal Data System. It is a system operated by the state of Maryland. It contains information on every single person in the state from the time they enter kindergarten to the time that they're no longer working. It's collected from different parts of the government. By the way, before this was the case, it was illegal to do this. I actually helped write the law that made it illegal to do this. That's the reason I'm working on this project, I guess. But at the time, we thought it was bad. We thought it was bad that if one agency collected your data for a given reason, and then now they have it, and you gave it to them because of the reason, but now they give it to someone else for some other reason that didn't tell you, that sounds bad. And so we actually wrote this internet, what's called the state internet privacy law that prevented the state from doing it. This is a special exception to that law with the intent of creating this data set, which is anonymized. So what we've done, we built a system that literally only one person at a time, and it requires 2 people to do it, has access to the identified data. So it's sort of like the nuclear silo, where you put the 2 keys in, right? It takes 2 people. That's the only way that we can get access to the identified data. And then when you pull it out, you can't get back in, right? So everything in the system is done with de-identified data. And the data pulls that we do have criterion such that we can't make pulls that are small enough that I can go back and determine, due to that cohort size, who the actual people were. So it doesn't allow really small analysis. So why would you want a system like this? Well, the state thought it was a good idea to be able to have a tool where legislators and the executive branch could actually study educational policies longitudinally and determine whether or not they worked. So, you get kids in kindergarten, you give them a different curriculum, how's it working? How do they do in middle school? How do they do in high school? How do they do in the work environment? Did they go to college? Did they stay out of jail? What happens to them? Right? Seems like a really good idea. Because now what you can actually do in the legislature is you can have an evidence-based discussion, which most of the time legislators don't do. That's not what's done usually. Usually it's a lot of hand-waving and, I thinks, and I've heard. But now you could actually have a conversation with real data about whether or not things work. But you can also do other things. You can look for particular cohorts, and you can look at how they did, and then you can decide what do those cohorts look like in today's data, right? So you can sort of go, you can prospect and retrospect, right? And look at, because of what happened to these other kids, I can make a projection about current kids who share that same set of attributes. Well, that could be good, right? I could use that information to identify individuals who might need, special help because they're at risk. This whole thing at risk is important. And now I could actually quantify what it means to be at risk, right? What are those special attributes that mean that? I could also use that to deny those people something, right? So believe it or not, I will not say who the institution was, but it was an institution in the state of Maryland. Tertiary education institution. It came to us and said, we want to use this data. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, we want to use it as part of our process for acceptance. Really? Tell me more. I'm intrigued. You want to use it for placement? Yeah. No, don't really want to use it for placement. We're concerned about people who won't complete. Because that's a metric we're measured by. We're measured by completers, right? And we just don't, if we know someone is apt to not be a completer, we probably don't want them here. And my answer was, well, I'm not going to help you because that's evil. You're taking away an individual's rights based on statistics that may or may not be reflective of that person's actual outcome. And think about that in a more general case when we think about data analytics, right? If we're using data analytics to make decisions about who gets something versus who doesn't get something, is that right? Is that what we should be doing with this technology? Or should we maybe be using it in other ways? The other thing that sort of bugged me, and still every time we have something that comes up in the project, this is inherently a political project. It's funded by legislature. The governor's office could pull the plug at any time in the state. That's the way executive branches have. There's always a potential that somebody could use the data in the system to produce an analysis that proves their point. It might not prove a broader point, right? And so since we're not actually responsible for the analysis, we're responsible for the data set, how do we refute that? How do you refute some analysis that was done? Because we're just providing the data. And so it does worry me. Okay, so who's heard of fake news? Everybody, right? All right, so we're working on a project called Media Forensics at DARPA. So the whole purpose of the Metaphor program is to detect digital media that's been manipulated. So whether that be Photoshoppy sorts of manipulations like this one. Who's seen this one? Anybody seen this picture? So this is after the shooting in Florida. These were the kids at that high school. This is a picture of a target that she's tearing up, and it's been superimposed with a picture of the Constitution that she's now tearing up.
Disgusting.
Yeah, right. So this didn't happen. That did happen. How about this one? This is this video where Nancy Pelosi sort of sounds drunk.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this one? Is there another one? How many people have seen this one? I wish I had actually downloaded this one to play. So this is what's, who knows what a GAN is?
It looks like key.
Sorry? Yeah, right, that's correct. So this is a technology that uses neural networks in opposition. So the idea is that you have one neural network which is creating imagery, and another one that's saying whether or not it's real or not. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until you get this sort of equilibrium, right? So in this particular case, they've trained the neural net to take his facial pattern and superimpose it on Barack Obama's head. So it literally looks like, as he's speaking in real time, President Obama is saying those things. And he happens to be pretty good at imitating his voice. Not too bad anyway. And so this is kind of a scary thing, right? So DARPA felt that this was a problem. And so we've been under contract on this project for about 5 years. There are several new projects that have spun out of this thing that are focusing on semantic, not just pixel stuff. So multimedia, multilingual text, other bits, not just pixels. So all that said, if I can determine whether or not something has been manipulated, should a government be able to suppress it? Right? So Facebook has this problem. Facebook knows, because they've got the same algorithms we do. They know when they have media has been manipulated, but yet they let it stay there. Okay. I'm not sure that's the right thing. Should all altered media be reported? Well, if all I'm doing is removing somebody's mole from their face, it's manipulated. But is it manipulated like this? And who's to say at what point you have a political, malicious manipulation, and at which point it's simply cosmetic? What sorts of suppressions are constitutional when you look at freedom of speech? I'm not sure. Interesting question. When does a subject have legal recourse under libel law? Well, most of the time not. If they're a person of public interest, they have no recourse. And in fact, under US trademark and intellectual property law, you don't even own your own likeness. So if a photographer walks by and takes a picture, The photographer owns that picture, not you, even though it's a picture of you. Under our law, the photographer owns the picture.
It's lost.
So what are the implications of that in this context, right? So if I have a GAN and I create an image of a person that is not really the president, and I then own it because I'm the author, I'm not breaking any laws. Under copyright law. And when is it going to be the case when people just don't trust anything they see anymore? I mean, I didn't bring any of the pictures, but on this project, we generate synthetic people, and the synthetic people are based on training of neural nets with literally thousands of celebrities. So we take thousands of celebrities, train the neural net to generate people that look like celebrities, and we get these people that look incredibly lifelike, that all of you would say look familiar, but they don't exist. They're synthetic, but they're based on characteristics of people we all know. We've got a project where we process facial recognition and characteristics of people in stores. This idea originally started with catching people who were stealing stuff. Right? There's TV cameras everywhere in all these stores. And nobody actually looks at this video until they're robbed, and then they go back and they say, "Oh yeah, look, see, he actually did steal it. I've got it on tape right here." Right? Well, and there's a sign when you walk in the store. It says, cameras inside or something, something like that. It's a disclaimer. Well, that's a disclaimer for everything. And now they can do anything because they have a camera, right? And so what are some of the things we're doing? Well, we can look at patterns of movement. We can count customers, number of people standing in line, how long do they stand in line. We can look at sentiment. Are they angry? Are they happy? We can judge their age within about 3 or 4 years, their gender, their ethnic background, and we can tell who it is. So even if we don't know, if we don't have a particular face in the library, we can say it's the same person that was here yesterday buying the same thing. Right? So, with all that said, this is all completely and utterly legal. But what are the rights to privacy that people think that they have when they walk into a store? What do you guys think? I mean, do you think that when you're walking outside that you should have an expectation of privacy? When you reach onto that counter and you pick up the Tootsie Rolls, is it my business that I'm buying Tootsie Rolls, or is it everybody's business I'm buying Tootsie Rolls? I've talked about this before. Should a person be able to own their own likeness? Can retailers use this information in a discriminatory way? We actually do it the opposite. So if somebody is enrolled in a loyalty program, and they come up to the counter to buy the thing, we look them up and they say, "Oh, Brian, he's a loyal customer. We're going to give him 10% off because he's enrolled in our loyalty program." Well, it's no different than if I handed them a loyalty card, right? It's just faster and quicker and all that good stuff, but it's a little creepy, right? It's a little creepy. Should retailers be required to disclose their use of video, i.e. just to have a video running? And should they be allowed to sell what they learn about these customers to other people? There's no regulation for this stuff, none. We regulate the hell out of the US government and their ability to use information about us, but these private companies, your favorites, Walmart, pick one, you've got a nice contract with Walmart, these guys know a lot about you. And there are companies that are in the information business. Axios is one, there's a number of them. And they're in the business of selling who you are electronically. What are your, the tracks that you left on the internet? Okay, so with all of this as the evidence to the argument, let's look at the analysis. I would say that the people in this room are better equipped than most of the folks that work for me. Gosh, that's a horrible thing to say. To deal with these kinds of problems because of this. First, your classes that you've taken. you've taken a breadth of classes, and you're going to take more, I hope, that are not in this department. Okay. Things that are going to equip you to be able to deal with this sort of diversity and or inspire you to come up with solutions, right? So you should seek breadth and inspiration. Second thing, your classmates. So unlike my engineering cohorts, who are basically, they've got, it's Cloneville, at least. People may look different, but they're all wired the same. At a liberal arts institution, people are wired differently. They're just wired differently. And that actually gives you an opportunity to seek tolerance and to understand that the world is actually not just a bunch of engineers that all think the same. So what happened back at Google, what happened in these sort of engineer gaggles, was nobody thought differently than these guys. They said, oh yeah, this is great, it's awesome, you know? Nobody was there to say no. Nobody was there to have another opinion. At least as a computer scientist with this background, having built the tolerance to the way that other people are wired together, you can be an advocate and a voice for that in that room. Your professors. So I gave a talk earlier today, and I gave somebody asked what the most interesting class was I took outside of computer science. And it was a class I took in the history department where, Al, remember this guy, Connor? Was it Connor?
Joe Connor.
Joe Connor. It was the best class I ever took. And it's in all 4 years. And it was called Why Lenin, Why Stalin was the name of the class. I was a Russian Area Studies minor. That class, the entire semester, or trimester time, he spent convincing us that he had this particular point of view. It was basically the whole course was based on a hypothesis. You know, he had this working hypothesis, and every book we read, every paper we wrote was about this, that Stalin was inevitable from Lenin. That was the whole thing. The whole time it bugged me. It bugged me. God, yeah, because we're reading these books, and the books actually didn't advocate for that exactly. I mean, certainly they talked about it, but they talked about other possibilities. And when I wrote my papers, I didn't really go along with his spiel. And I got A's still, so I knew it was all right. We got to the end of the class, we turned in the blue books, into the semester, and he held everybody after class, and he said to the whole class, he said, Stalin was not inevitable. You're all wrong, except Rizzi. That's great. That was incredible. He spent the whole semester reeling us in, right? Wishing that we would argue with him. Wishing that we would, you know, sort of take this challenge to the establishment, right? He wanted it. Your professors want it, right? They don't want you to argue facts. That's different, right? But when you're in a class and you're talking about opinion, they want a reasoned argument. Take it. Take the one that isn't theirs. If for nothing else, to just prove that you can do it. Okay? Advocate for a point of view that is not the mainstream. Extracurriculars. Seek discomfort. Try new things, take new roles, be an advocate, do things you're not comfortable doing. I never took a business class. Never took an accounting class. Never took a marketing class. But I was on the Student Senate Finance Committee. You can trust your money with me. No. It was a huge experience for me. Huge. I got to meet people from that place, that was Carnegie, I forget, that building over there, that I never would have met, ever. And got involved in something that became kind of fundamental to running a business, which is what I do now. Those were sort of that initial set of things. And then last, you should be seeking experiences that take you into the unknown and teach you to empathize. Study abroad, internships, volunteering, these are the things that teach you to advocate for the little guy, for the person not in that room. And they teach you to be an advocate. It's more than just saying no, it's actually having a reasoned view. And being able, I think, as a sort of collection of all of these things, developing habits of curiosity and critical thinking that make you different. That make you different than the folks that, that I hire from Rensselaer or MIT or Carnegie Mellon. And they're all great schools, and they're fabulous people, and they're really smart, but you're different. So with all that said, here's the exercises. I don't know how long you guys want to stay. I'm certainly willing to let you go. Or we can talk about these 6 challenges that I think are sort of the things that bug me when I go to bed at night. Okay. Your call. Are there any on this list that when you read it, you go, yeah, God, that's horrible? Yep.
So one of the things that I'm studying specifically, I'm actually part of the liberal arts curriculum. I'm triple majored, so I have cybersecurity, political science, and Russian language,
Perfect.
Of all things.
Oh, sure.
Yes. And one of the things that I've been most closely studying in the last couple of years is fake news and bot activity on social media. And my senior computer science thesis is trying to do heuristic analysis of potential accounts that could be bots. So I'm wondering, in challenge number 3, truth isn't truth, what do you see in terms of social media about what kind of a role it's playing in government, in social life, in computer ethics? How do you see that unfolding, or how has it already unfolded?
Yeah, so it's a really good thing and a really bad thing, right? So on the one hand, I think social media platforms have created some really good things, reaching out to individuals who might not otherwise be able to get out of a house or connect with people they haven't seen in a long time, or to help other people. But in truth, I think what the most difficult thing about it is it's created echo chambers of hate, or microcosms of interest that prevent empathy from occurring. And so a lot of the work that we're doing at DARPA now on the subsequent projects to Metaphor, one of them is called AIDA, which is focused on multilingual text, which I alluded to, and imagery and video and audio. But there's also another project called Semaphore and another project called Eden. All of these are dealing with not just the content itself, but propagation. Right? So it's about the network and how the network is creating this sort of self-licking ice cream cone of badness. I don't know that I have the solution other than recognizing that this is going on. And I can tell you that on the AIDEN program, the purpose of AIDEN is to recognize malicious intent in social media with an intent to disrupt a nation state, and then to produce active countermeasures to stop it. And so either stopping it electronically, either in a way that's sort of super obvious or not so super obvious, or countering it with other information. So it's sort of an information bomb against another information bomb. I think on balance, I think we're going to look back at this portion, this phase of computer science, and we're going to think we didn't get it right, frankly.